Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jim Whalen. This is episode number 7 of the Sports Consigliere podcast. I'm along with my host, the voice of Woodbridge football, the coach of the girls soccer team at Woodbridge, the flag football coach at Woodbridge. Am I missing anything else, Jerry?
More importantly, I'm your co-host, Jimmy.
Your co-host, my friend, my buddy, my pal, my consigliere, Jerry Calla. How you doing, Jerry?
Good, Jimmy. Good morning. How are you? Hello to everyone.
Can't complain. So we're looks like you were right about the Celtics. Looks like
we're halfway there.
Halfway there, but I don't know. And I was right about the Panthers. But I think the big news of the week was the guy from your old neighborhood, Danny Hurley, going out to the Lakers. I kind of sent shockwaves through the NBA and NCAA sports world. That's what everybody was talking about over the weekend. You know, Adrian Wojnarowski, 20 years ago, he wrote that book, Miracle of St. Anthony. So he's close to the Hurley family. I think he still keeps in contact with the father. And I think when they were doing the book tour, I guess 20 years ago, I went to one of these speaking engagements where Bob Sr. was, and he says, people ask him the same question, how come you never left? And he goes, he said, I think you have to know it yourself. He goes, I'm a high school coach, and that's where I am. So what do you think about his decision to stay at UConn, and what do you think about the whole, I guess, engagement or the recruitment process for Dan to go over to LA?
Well, I think it was, like you said, it was, it's a remarkable story. You know, the bottom line is I do think that he has aspirations to enter the NBA one day. But again, I was, they threw a lot of money his way, which ultimately resulted in him getting, an extension or a restructure from UConn. But I think what nobody is talking about, and I think when you really scrape away at it, yes, it is the Lakers, tradition. It's the Lakers, the Lakers, the Cowboys. There's certain organizations that, get people excited. But at the end of the day, I was happy to see him have the discipline and avoid the temptation, because I just don't think it's an ideal situation for him. You have the whole, what is LeBron going to do? There's varying accounts of who, Jeannie Buss is, calling the shots. You have outside influence. She has these unofficial advisors, even though they say that, they're gutted, Magic, certain ex-players. And I think that, for somebody in his position, what he has at UConn, far outweighs, coaching the Lakers. And he's looking to three-peat. And, there's a very good chance that, that's going to happen, or he's going to be in a very good position to make a long run, into March of 25. I do think that he has, they always used to say the perfect job for Mr. Hurley, for Bob Sr. was St. Anthony's. In comparison to Danny, started, at St. Benny's, moved his way up through the ranks. And, and I do think one day, he will be in the NBA, in the right situation. I'm sure, being a North Jersey guy, that the Knicks, would appeal to him, being from the area. But, I think also too, his family, the relocation to LA, and my opinion is, I just don't think it's a very good job yes, it is the Lakers, Lakers, Yankees, Cowboys. I get all that. But, what's the roster look like? What are you going to do with LeBron? They're going to force LeBron, Bronny. You got AD. There's a lot of questions there. For their future. I think that and the timing was not right. I'm sure financially, I'm sure that was right, but the grass isn't always greener. And I think as the process, kept going, all signs were pointing to him staying at UConn.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think that's probably the right decision. There was talking about they're also talking about like his wife. His parents are still, parents still live in Jersey City.
Yeah,
So
East Coast
I
roots.
know, so his sister's still here. So I mean, I think it was probably the right decision. The money was always tempting. And it's also is the Lakers, but coming from the East Coast, going to the West Coast. But where do you think the Lakers go now? You think they go to JJ Redick? I know last episode we talked a little bit about that. You think that's the name who's going to emerge?
I think to be honest, I think the Lakers were expecting him to take the job. And I think now, based on some reports, I think there's they interviewed certain candidates. I mean, Reddick's name was out there. Now you have the old, well, whoever gets hired is going to be the bridesmaid, so to speak. And I think Jay Wright's name was thrown out there. I don't think that's going to happen either. But I think they're a mess.
Yeah,
They're a mess. I always say this, when years ago, when Jeannie Buss's father went along that same route, he wanted the hot college coach. And I'm dating myself now. He wanted Tarkanian when, Tark the Shark and UNLV was really progressing out that way. He went after Tarkanian with the belief that he was going to get him based on a certain dollar figure. And when push came to shove, he wanted to stay, at UNLV. And, probably it's the right move to happen with the Lakers because it was a slow process, if you will, because there was two coaches after that that had to happen before they landed on Pat Riley. And that's another story. That's another whole story for another show, probably, on how Pat Riley became the guy. But again, now, it's like anything else. Sometimes when, things get public like that, you better hope, you get that big catch, because now, whoever gets that hired, first question, how do you feel about being the number 2 choice? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
So
exactly, you're always gonna be looking over your shoulder, and you also got the LeBron James factor in there. And then I know one of those docs. I know a couple documentaries came out about L.A. Lakers. I think that Tark's business partner was found dead in a car somewhere too.
In the back of a trunk.
That's a bad PR move too. So, but we wanted to talk about. We don't have a guest today. We want to talk a little bit about the New York Yankees documentary. Both you and I were Yankee fans at the time in 1990. I think for Yankee fans, everybody loves Steinbrenner, but it was come to a point where I think there's certain dates in history people circle, and that date, I think it was July 30th, 1990. Everybody kind of knew where they were when they heard the boss was suspended by Fay Vincent in Major League Baseball. So I know I was at my friend Phil's house in his kitchen, and we couldn't believe it. But we were also excited because, Steinbrenner didn't have a lot of interference on the team. He was definitely bigger than the game, bigger than the Yankees. But bottom line is they weren't winning. So we knew a change had to be made. So what was your did you watch the documentary, and what was your take on the team back then?
I watched the documentary the first opportunity, that it was available. And I think what's important before you talk about the 90 Yankees in the documentary is you look at the 80s. And the 80s, being a Yankee fan in the 1980s was like a big tease, I used to say. You started out 1980, okay, they were in the postseason, lost to Kansas City. Then they followed that up, 81, Steinbrenner's big toy, if you will, at the time. Dave Winfield coming in 81. They make the World Series. Probably the first time for me as a kid, that was my biggest disappointment in sports. They're up 2-0. George Frazier wound up losing 3 games. They lost the series. And then what happened is then to go forward now, to go from 82 through 89, Steinbrenner stayed the course, which was every year to bring in free agents. It didn't matter if they fit. 1982, I believe his term was they were going to go from the Bronx Bombers to the Bronx Burners. He brought in Dave Collins from the Reds, who was known to steal bases. Randolph, they were looking to play small ball. And every year, it was almost like being a kid. It was like you were waiting after Christmas for your real gift as a Yankee fan, which was who was going to be the free agent signing. In the 80s. There was so many of them. Jack Clark, Steve Sachs, and the names keep rolling in. High-level free agents, low-level free agents. The minor league system, you knew in the 80s when somebody came up, with the exception of Mattingly, they thought they had something in Balboni, but a lot of people that came up, Doug Drabeck, we could sit here and go for hours over the people that got traded, that were prospects. It was get rid of prospects, bring in veterans. Steinbrenner liked these toys because that's what worked for him. When he came in the 70s, that's what worked for him. That's what worked for him through 81. Now you get to 90. And I think what's fascinating about the 80s is if the Yankees were the winningest team in baseball in the 1980s, they only have 2 postseason appearances to show for it. If there was a wild card in the 80s, they would have been in the wild card, for several years. Now you get to 1990. Nothing changes. They bring in Pascual Perez. They bring in, it was like the land of broken toys with that pitching staff. Dave LaPointe, Tim Leary coming off some good years with the Dodgers and that 88 Dodger team. Steve Sachs was their only all-star in 90. Mattingly batted .256, I believe, in 90. Steve Sachs was the only all-star. The 90 season really was a microcosm of how not to build a baseball team. Now you throw in the fact that a longtime Yankee hero started the season to be the manager, beloved by the fans, one of the biggest moments in Yankee history, and he gets fired in the very place that he made his name in Yankee history. I mean, there is just a lot that happened in 90. And now you throw in the fact that the head honcho goes down. It's a fascinating story. And then what happens is, like they say, sometimes you got to hit rock bottom to get back up top. And that's what happened. I mean, this documentary, it's so interesting. It was so juicy. We got to start with the most bizarre situation that you have a player come in, Mel Hall, a lot of fanfare with him coming from the Indians, coming from the Cubs. A lot of fanfare. Lefty bat in Yankee Stadium, a good swing for Yankee Stadium. And Mel Hall's Yankee stats were pretty good. If I'm not mistaken, I believe in 89 or 90, or if not both, he led the team in runs. Now you throw in that he's basically out there with an underage girl, having her come to the stadium. I mean, this documentary is unbelievable.
Well, I mean, the thing is, there was no social media back then. I had no idea that was really going on. And not only that, they put it in the press in the
yearbook. Yeah.
So I mean, and ironically, now we're getting inundated with all these documentaries. I mean, my wife listens to this woman, Kate Casey, what to listen to, like during COVID, and I heard her listening to it. I'm like, what is she talking about? She talks about like Real Housewives and stuff like that. And she's talking about a Yankee documentary. I'm like, what is she talking about? She's talking about her name, like Mel Hall and everything else. So that's how I kind of found out about what to watch with Kate Casey. So she's on the West Coast. But I mean, and then the whole thing with Billy Martin. I mean, Billy Martin was hired, fired, and they made Miller Lite commercials about him back in the 80s but like the whole thing that, he was going to replace Bucky Dent, and he ends up dying in an accident. So, I mean, it's just like,
that's really how the year started, because that was Christmas of I guess that would be Christmas of 89. And that kind of led in because everybody knew it. I mean, listen, he told Buck Showalter, because Billy was a big Buck Showalter guy, over the years in spring training. Buck Showalter was the third base coach that year. And he told Buck Showalter, you're going to be on the staff. It's just interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And he talked about Don Mattingly. I mean, he put a lot of butts in the seats during the 80s. The thing is, I was a big Don Mattingly fan, and like I remember, those years, and that was probably our formative years, you and I, and like playing at city kids playing in the playground. Everybody kind of mimicked Don Mattingly's swing. And I remember talking to my friends on the playground, like how great it would be when they win it. Now, how great it's going to be. And the thing is, Don Mattingly was really the face of the Yankees.
Absolutely. And he was I don't want to diminish this because I was a huge Mattingly guy, but for a brief period, probably the best hitter in baseball. Him and Wade Boggs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now you look at the. Now let's get into the specifics of the documentary. I mean, for a lack of a better term, I mean, they mess with Mattingly, right? So let's figure this out now. Bucky Dent, basically known to be a Yankee in the 70s, the glory years, one of the biggest home runs in history, and then he gets fired in when the Yankees are at Fenway in Boston. You couldn't have done that a series or two before or a series or two after, right? So now you have Bucky Dent, Yankee history. You have Mattingly. Mattingly's getting messed with his contract, okay, but yet Steinbrenner, in his then the whole Winfield thing. Winfield eventually got traded, which was comical in itself because he had a no trade clause. You have the general manager saying he did get traded. Winfield saying they can't do that. I mean, Winfield, longtime Yankee, but yet we're throwing bouquets, at the feet of Pascual Perez, which is very, very bizarre.
Yeah.
We're throwing bouquets at Mel Hall, who's bringing Cougars, into the clubhouse. I mean, I think the most interesting part of the documentary, and we have all these side stories, Mel Hall's extracurricular activities, with this girl. You have President Trump is mentioned in the documentary because eventually Mel Hall moved in to Trump Towers and then wasn't paying his bills. And Donald Trump probably had the intuition. Well, the best part of it is when he seeks out Mel Hall's girlfriend and says, "Hey, listen, I can see it in your face. I'm paraphrasing. If you want out of this relationship, you let me know. I'll help you." I mean, this documentary, I was amazed that it was really in 3 parts. They could have probably did 20 parts.
Oh yeah, well they skipped over a lot though in that 90s. I mean, talk about Jack McDowell, that whole thing in '93 when he got the sign and he did the finger to the.
Well, this is strictly for that 1 year. I mean, strictly for 1990. I mean, and then you replace. It's funny you talk about Billy Martin replacing Bucky Dent. You replace Bucky Dent with a guy that had no business in a major league clubhouse, which was Stump Merrill. It was. I mean, I felt it's almost to the point where you felt bad for him being thrown into that situation. With the players, but there is positives. And I think, we can go into, to be honest with you, I don't think Mel Hall really should, we should really take up our airtime, talking about Mel Hall. Mel Hall was the easiest player on that team to find because he's been in the same position for a long time now, and he's still going to be in the same position. I don't even know when they interviewed him. I mean, I didn't really get any remorse out of him. I mean, I just think, he's like, I got caught and, this is what happened. And it was bizarre. It was a bizarre situation. He's a bizarre guy.
They moved in the parents' bed. Like,
that's correct.
I mean, the thing is, like, you have a daughter, I have a daughter. I mean, like.
Well, I mean, I think you had the prosecutor that put him away. Really lambasted the right people, lambasted the right people, the Yankee organization, the school for allowing them to go to the prom together, the parents. But, like Rosanna Scotto said, I mean, again, it was great to have Rosanna Scotto, great restaurant, by the way. I took my wife there. I took my wife there a few years ago. But Rosanna Scotto, New York, media royalty, just saying that in 1990, people just didn't think like that, because I think what happens is and trust me, I'm not diminishing, I'm not minimizing the impact that Mel Hall, had on this woman's life. I'm just saying that Rosanna Scotto put it best is that no social media, the parents were okay with it. So we just didn't think like that, during that time. Which not that she's justifying it to make it acceptable, but those were just different times. It was like, okay, the parents know, the parents are going to the games. He's staying in the house with the parents. Ultimately, if the parents are okay with it, who are we to say otherwise?
Well, the thing is, I watched this with my wife, and then also during COVID, you go back and watch. There's nothing really to watch. Everybody's locked in. I started watching Hill Street Blues. Now, this is a show that is on NBC,
Correct.
prime time, Thursday nights, can't miss. And I'm watching episode 1, and the sergeant who said, "Let's be careful out there," he's talking openly about picking up his girlfriend at a band practice. And the woman's like, "Oh, what's she, the band instructor?" He goes, "No, she's in the band. She's in high school." So that's how the mentality was basically at that time. Which you look at it now, it's crazy, crazy.
Right.
I mean, that was the #1 show for years, and the writers went through all those screening processes, and it was okay to have this, dirty old man dating a high school girl. I mean, it's just crazy, the thought process and how acceptable it was. And I don't know, maybe it wasn't exposed that much, but I was watching episode #1 at Hill Street Blues, like, oh my God, like, there it is in front and center. So, but turn the conversation a little bit to Stick Michael. Stick Michael took over. I think that was the right move for that time. I mean, he knew baseball, he knew talent, he was a good evaluator of talent. What do you think about Stick Michael and taking over as the GM?
Well, Steinbrenner, that's arguably the greatest decision he ever made. Excuse me. Bringing in a guy who has every job in the Yankee organization, from manager to third base coach, you name it. Okay, scout. He brings in Gene Michael, and Gene Michael, probably even now, he should get a statue. I mean, they should put him out there, in Monument Park. He comes in, a professional baseball man, makes difficult decisions, has to clean house, and ultimately, simultaneously, the only positive I would say out of that 90 season is Kevin Moss comes on, right? Lights the city on fire, if you will.
Yeah.
But that shows you, or that reminds everybody, hey, we do have young talent, and that's where the emphasis is put to draft, most of that core 4 and to really change the philosophical makeup of the organization. And it took a while, but now, you get rid of Stump, you get Buck Showalter in there, a great baseball mind. And going forward, that makes that 95 playoff appearance. I mean, we could go. I mean, it's like you had the gentleman on from the Expos previously. You look at the strike year, the Yankees, had the, Yankees and Montreal, two teams in baseball. But again, Gene Michael comes in and had no distractions, didn't have the big guy looking over his shoulder, was allowed to, operate and maneuver. Basically, and he streamlined the power structure in the organization, and they made a lot of good decisions. And I found it ironic that one of the gentlemen also mentioned that was part of that Gene Michael crew is Brian Sabian, who is now back with the organization after being out with the San Francisco Giants, for several years. And Gene Michael, you give him credit. I mean, slowly but surely bringing in the right guys, the Wade Boggs, the Paul O'Neills, and, eventually finding, Jimmy Key. But, I always say, like, there are certain players that don't get enough credit. And you look at the gentleman that played shortstop before Jeter, bringing in Mike Gallego, not a big deal, but again, bringing in a good locker room guy, right? The Yankees were having trouble now for a few years there, bringing in, because nobody wanted to go there. They were burned. Maddox didn't want to go there. They were used as leverage. Now you're getting guys like Jimmy Key, Wade Boggs, which shaped, bringing in a Paul O'Neill, bringing in those guys, which basically started the foundation.
Well, that's that Paul O'Neill. I mean, the thing is, it was Paul O'Neill for Roberto Kelly, and Roberto Kelly was a popular Yankee. And the thing is, like, that
very difficult decision.
Yeah, it turned out to be really a great move.
You mentioned Roberto Kelly. Statistically, Roberto Kelly had, in the 90 season, led the team in hits.
So, well, that's a good fun fact. I didn't know that one, Jerry.
Yeah.
So, but
we talk about. I always listen. Those years, obviously, you knew the Yankees weren't going to win it, and they weren't going to be in the postseason. So you have to remember that the All-Star game was a big deal. Okay. And that year, a lot of people felt Roberto Kelly, should have made the All-Star team instead of Steve Sachs. But again, it's a great documentary. They did a great job. I'm a real big Joel Sherman fan from the New York Post. It was great to see him obviously heavily involved. Michael Kay. It was a very good documentary. And I think the way they portrayed it as we got further into the documentary is, and that's what 90 really should be remembered for, is what happened with Steinbrenner, Stick Michael, and how that shaped the future championship teams.
Yeah, and then we got something on the Stormer. Jerry West passed away, but I just want to put this age 86. So we'll get to that real soon. Breaking news, but just talk about that, and also the Yankee documentary. Also, like Buck Showalter, he go to 95, and then Joe Torre, and he got fired in 95, and then Joe Torre took over. I was like, my God, like, could they pick a more generic manager that, somebody that's gonna, we just thought he was just gonna be a patsy for Steinbrenner, but I mean, what a great choice for that. And then I don't know if you saw the Yogi Berra documentary, but same thing happened to Bucky Dent, happened to Yogi Berra. Yogi Berra's granddaughter did put a documentary together, and he got fired. I think it was out in Chicago, and Don Baylor told Dale Berra, who was on his team, like, hey, your dad just got fired. So there was a whole back and forth about either if Yogi Berra could take the bus back to the airplane, what do you do? He got fired in the middle. So that's what we were dealing with a lot as Yankee fans in that time. So I mean,
no stability whatsoever. You're 100%
and
right.
Then I think the guy who directed, like Joel Sherman, I think was based on his book, and then also I think it was a COVID project by the writer director. He put it together during COVID, which is, really think about it, and it's a pretty creative idea. Who would have thought about making a documentary series about the Yankees at that time? So it's pretty creative. But we just heard that Jerry West passed away. I know you're a big basketball guy. About basketball. What's your take on Jerry West and his impact on the game?
I mean, really, it's a loss. I mean, obviously, there's a reason that he is the NBA logo, which now, unfortunately, they'll probably try to change that now that he's passed on. I have a personal Jerry West story several years ago, and I alluded to this on the show prior. Is while I was attending the induction ceremony of Patrick Ewing, there was a few other people as well. Jerry West obviously was in attendance, and I had an opportunity to speak with him very briefly. Very nice, interaction. We took a picture, very down to earth. I had a little bit of an issue. I know it was drum for TV of what they kind of did to him in that Lakers show, starring Adrian Brody on because it was cut after 2 seasons. They were supposed to go the gamut really into Showtime, but the show kind of picks up where Jerry West steps back as the coach. They make him look a little psychotic in the documentary, but I mean, again, what Jerry West meant to the LA Lakers, as a player, as a coach, management, he was LA basketball, and he was great, in the NBA. I mean, I think Walt Clyde Frazier and him, you talk about 2 heavyweights that got to go at it, in 2 NBA finals. It's a sad day, for basketball, and he is the logo for a reason.
And he's also the one who drafted Kobe.
Correct.
He was the one who saw something in Kobe, and then and he really made the right moves. I don't think he liked the LMU coach that was in the Showtime, Westhead. I don't think he liked Westhead, and
no.
I don't know if Riley was his guy, but he just for some reason, as a basketball guy, he knew talent. And even I talk about Hubie Brown a lot, coming from Elizabeth. Hubie Brown coming from Elizabeth. He's the one who brought him out of retirement in 2004 to coach the Grizzlies.
Correct.
So, and then he was also he was coach of the year, Hubie Brown. So I mean,
I had a great year. Absolutely.
Really great basketball mind, great evaluator of talent, and then really knew what buttons to push and everything else. But like I said, as a player, he never won. He got snake bitten too many times, but as a GM, he won plenty. So
West Virginia guy as well.
yeah, actually West Virginia. So you're right about that. So I mean, but like I said, I saw the Showtime documentary. I don't know if that did him service too, but I guess they had to create some sort of controversy on it. But it's a sad day in basketball. 86 years old, he was still had an influence over the game. So
Absolutely.
But I know we're getting up to it. But one last conversation I had on my ledger was we talked a little bit about Don Mattingly, not in the Hall of Fame. I think Ichiro is going to be up in 2024. Obviously, the class of 2020, 2025, 2024. It's already slated. I think Helton's on there. A couple players. Helton, but Mattingly's still not in the Hall of Fame. So, what do you think about him getting written in from the Veterans Committee? And you think that his numbers standing alone at that time, like you said, probably from 84 to 86, 87, he probably was one of the best players in baseball. And 1985 MVP, came up second, right. 86 behind Clemens, who got six-time All-Star, 9 Gold Gloves. Nobody could do the 3-6-3 double play better than he did. He'd field the position very well. I think that injuries caught up with him. It was nice to see the 95 season, him finally make the playoffs, because the Yankees never made the playoffs with him. He came in as a rookie during the Pine Tar game. He could have had a record for consecutive hits with that Pine Tar game. So they had to replay that game, and if he got a hit, he would have got the record for consecutive hits. So he definitely left his stamp on in baseball. What's your take on him? And he's comparison to Kirby Puckett, but the only difference between him and Kirby Puckett has 2 World Series rings in 87 and 91. Very similar stats, but
I mean, again, listen, Mattingly, was my set. I always say this when it comes to baseball. Mattingly, growing up as a Yankee fan, he was my second favorite Yankee. My first favorite Yankee was Reggie Jackson. Then it went to Mattingly. Mattingly is my all-time favorite Yankee. The Hall of Fame, the issue with the Hall of Fame is that you look at people's numbers. There's the system in which players are elected. It's inconsistent. Because, and not to pick on anybody, but how can Don Mattingly, not be in the Hall of Fame, and Phil Rizzuto be in the Hall of Fame? Phil Rizzuto is in the Hall of Fame because at the time, Bill White, his longtime friend, his longtime broadcasting partner, was the president of the Veterans Committee, or whatever it was named at that time. I think Mattingly is a Hall of Famer. I also think there's a lot of people. I used to make this argument about a lot of guys from that era. Jack Morris is in the Hall of Fame. It took them a long time to put Jack Morris in the Hall of Fame, and I always said this. In the 80s, in the 90s, right? Minnesota, Detroit, Toronto, Game 7, okay? You want a guy, right, where you think it's going to be a one-run game, series-deciding game. I wanted Jack Morris. And the fact that it took him as long as it did to get into the Hall of Fame is a joke.
Yeah, well, Jack Morris, he was 1-4-7. You pitch a Game 1, Game 4, and Game 7.
Correct.
Yeah,
you got him for 3, right?
Yeah, so there's no doubt about it. So
right, but Mattingly, again, the back went out. Michael Kay always said it best about Mattingly, and I believe he mentioned it in the documentary, is the saving grace. Yes, he only made the one postseason with the 95 team that lost to the Mariners, but he had a great postseason. I mean, when Gary Thorne was announcing the game and Mattingly and Sierra went back to back, I mean, that was Mattingly's, defining moment as a player. He made the postseason. It took him a long time, but when he got there, he did perform. Now, I also look at people from the era of the 80s. There's a lot of guys that I think should be in the Hall of Fame. I think Mattingly should be in the Hall of Fame. I also think, they're doing stuff now with stats from the Negro League, but I also think you mentioned Roger Clemens. I think the Hall of Fame, what needs to happen is certain players need to get in the Hall of Fame so baseball could kind of move on with this. Because every time there's a Hall of Fame induction, when the vote comes out, the quote unquote, steroid era players are always going to be talked about. Barry Bonds was a Hall of Famer before anything ever happened. Roger Clemens was a Hall of Famer.
He was a Hall of Famer before he started doing the juice.
That's what I said. Right. Absolutely. Now, again, I think it would be better for baseball. You want to put these guys, in a certain wing of the Hall of Fame, but they need to be in there. And I think it would just be better, for the game. What happens with Pete Rose? I would have thought by now, with the change of the guard after Giamatti, multiple commissioners, if you will, he would have got in. I'm convinced that Pete Rose may never get in, or he'll be in, after he passes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the thing is now gambling's illegal.
That's a whole
illegal. So I mean,
we could do a whole nother show about that.
But the '95 series, I think, as a Yankee fan, I think I remember talking about it with my friend back then. That was Mariano's coming out party. Mariano came in and really shut it down. But Jeter was on the roster, didn't really get too much burn. But that was the arc on it. But I believe with you. I think that Manley should be in the Hall of Fame for that period of time. He was the best player. If you look at some of the stats, my father probably disagreed with Phil Rizzuto, but he thought Phil Rizzuto was an excellent player. So, I'm growing up third generation Yankee fan. I think everybody else. I mean, I used to go to my grandmother's house, and she would be, playing praying a rosary and watching Yankee games. So that was my youth growing up, and that was baseball. What baseball kind of meant to people at that time. It was people lived and died with the Yankees. Now it's just not really it's not really a spectator sport. So, but anyway, Jerry, you have anything more to add? Episode number coming up to the time. But, anything else to add as far as?
No, I mean, again, I think we talked about some current events. With Coach Hurley staying at UConn. We talked about, the Celtics being up 2-0. You had to work in the fact that your Florida Panthers pick looks pretty good right now. And then, listen, we had to pivot in mid-show. We see come across the bottom of the screen. I actually got a text message from our number one fan, Pat Monahan, telling me
Pat Monahan, number one fan, right?
He's our number one fan, telling me that Jerry West, passed away. And, we probably need to do a show on Jerry West, or we should do a show on Jerry West. And again, just wrapping this up because, sometimes our plan was to come in and to really get, hot and heavy, if you will, about the 90 documentary. The great thing about sports is, the current events sometimes, push you into a different direction. We touched upon Jerry West. We touched upon, Dan Hurley and what's going on, in the NHL and the NBA. And the only thing I want to say in closing is I enjoyed being a 90, the 90 Yankee documentary. That was, a former, like you said, those were our good years, as really being fans. Steinbrenner, getting banished or whatever was the greatest thing that happened to the organization, because I also think, the comeback story, there's the comeback story in that George did learn a lesson, because when he came back, for the most part, he wasn't the old George. Yes, people thought he was out of his mind by making Torre the manager. But hey, listen, you got to give it to the big guy. That was the right call. Because Torre wasn't known, losing record. Again, he managed some very bad Met teams. He managed a Braves team that he took to the playoffs the one year with Bob Horner was on fire. And then he did, he had a decent showing when he was the manager of the Cardinals. But again, I go back to, I don't know if it was the Daily News or the Post. when that was announced, Clueless Joe was the headline, and that really wasn't a welcome move, so to speak. And by all means, I mean, he pushed every button, or every button that he pushed was the right move going forward.
Well, even like Don Zimmer on there.
Correct.
I mean, just who he bounced, who his consigliere was, just
Mel Stottlemyre,
Don Zimmer, and Mel Stottlemyre. So he had the right mix of people there, and also it helps that you're the Yankees and there's no salary cap too.
Right. So, well, yeah, I mean, free agents really started coming in then. I mean, that was.
So I mean, funny story about that. I just I just married. I had my 25th wedding anniversary. I remember getting married. My in-laws coming up. Dave Cohen's pitching his no-hitter. So my in-laws come up from Virginia. I'm watching the game. They go out with my wife about 2.5 hours later. I'm come home and they're watching the game. And I can just see the judgment coming on me. But I'm like, in the back of my head, like, he's pitching a no-hitter. So my in-laws are not sports fans. But just like that, the Yankees locked you in. Like, I used to watch every game on Channel 11. So it was definitely a romantic time in sports. But
I mean, you look at the the David Cohn, the perfect game, right? David Wells, the perfect game. I mean, the Don Larson, perfect game. I mean, the Doc Gooden no-hitter. I mean, and you look at the Jim Abbott. I mean, those are things that that stay with you as a fan. And I think that's kind of.
They alluded to the Andy Hawkins no-hitter.
Oh, that's yes.
So
but again, what I found interesting in that, and I never knew that at the time, that little detail is that I was under the impression that Jim Leyritz, I mean, he had to battle the wind out there, but I was under the impression that Jim Leyritz had some extensive minor league experience as an outfielder, which is what Stump Merrill was trying to tap into, and obviously that wasn't the case. Leyritz was just as surprised as anybody when he was told that he was playing left field in Old Comiskey Park, which is very difficult to do.
Yeah, exactly. Well, listen, Jerry, I think we're wrapping up this. A lot of good stuff on this episode. I have
absolutely.
I reached out to a couple guests to see if we get back. But anyway, Jerry, to you, happy Father's Day.
You too, Jimmy.
Dave is our Liv Shriver. He's the voice of God. Happy Father's Day to you, Dave. And also, he produces this episode, definitely gave us the breaking news. And shout out to Pat Monahan, #1 fan, and gave us the information about Jerry West. But also, Dave, Chop Sports Media, we're part of their channel. He also just dropped a fandom app, who he teamed up with Freddie Prinze Jr., which is pretty unique idea, which if you go to a game, you have pictures on your phone. You could post pictures of your phone. So if you have like first game with your son, daughter, wherever else it is, fandom app is on now on iOS. So I downloaded it last night. It took me 30 seconds. I haven't put any pictures on there, but I took my son to the 4 years old and my dad to Yankee Stadium, old Yankee back in 2008. So seeing the Minnesota Twins, I still have the ticket stubs. So, I mean, that's a pretty unique idea. So Dave's the driving force on that. So if you're looking at interested in podcasts and everything else, Dave is somebody who's helped us out and definitely produces this show. And, definitely else. I apologize for the noise in the background. I had some work done in the house, while this was going on. So that was my fault if you heard some bumps in it. But anyway, Jerry, listen.
The show goes on, Jimmy. Remember that.
Yeah, that's it. So we'll talk off camera. But thanks, thanks for joining us, and it was a great episode. And then we'll see what next week brings. But we're going to be dropping these episodes once a week, and keep following us on social media. Contact us on social media if you have any show guests or interest. But we're trying, this was basketball specific, we're trying to broaden the horizon. But check out the Bronx Zoo, and also check out the other documentaries. Yogi Berra was a good one, and also John Turturro when the Bronx is burning. That's also another good one. So if you have a rainy day, or if you want to get away from life, those are good documentaries to watch. But Jerry, have a good day. And
you too, Jimmy. Take care, everybody. We'll catch you soon.
Yeah, this is Jimmy and Jerry signing off, episode number 7. Have a great day.
See ya.